It's saying preparing, setting up. I'll be quiet in a second. All right, we're live, Roger. I think we're live on YouTube. Can you hear me all right, Roger?
Yep, all set.
Cool. Let's do this. So a couple of things. Last week we talked about the virus mutation D614G. We're segueing this week into antigen testing. First, just because I know some folks kind of are questioning, why is the CEO, me, of a job description software company talking about COVID? First off, I'm no expert at all. Rodger will be the first to admit he's no expert. I think he's the most focused guy on COVID that I know and has a lot to share. More on that in a second. But basically, the reason I'm doing this on OnGig's channel, I'm the CEO, so I get some flexibility on doing things like that. But I believe the virus is a once in a lifetime event impacting not just health, but companies, hiring. It's so important. It's one of the reasons when it was happening, I asked my team to build talentairport.com. Note not to make any money, just to help folks losing jobs, and then folks who could hire those talent who lost their jobs, just to be a good human, as I like to say. This is similar to that. I want to spread Rodger's knowledge because he's got some cool ideas. My head was exploding when I talked to him, and I thought I could help a little bit because I've got a little bit of reach, and that's why we're doing it. Rodger, anything just to add to any of what I just said?
No, I think that was spot on. For those who might not have listened last week, I started following the virus closely in February. In mid-March, started watching the figures closely, both every state throughout the country and different countries around the US. And just seeing it, studying it as much as I am, ultimately kind of found a few trends, some things that jumped out at me. And I've been thinking and studying as to what those are and how we could help make the situation better. And so when we chatted and you offered the opportunity to kind of put some of this out to the world, on the off chance that somebody of influence and ability to help make the situation better for everyone could do so, I jumped at the opportunity as well. We can quickly, for those who might not have listened.
By the way, Rodger, before we dive in, just a quick note. For this video, we tagged some interesting companies and people. So we tagged Donald Trump. I think you're muted right now. Or no, there you are. You still going, Rodger? I got YouTube Live on the other window, so I was tricked. I was like, wait, Rodger is talking, but nothing's coming out of his mouth. That's because there's a delay. Rodger and I are new to this. We're just doing this to be good humans again. But anyway, just thought it's kind of fun that we tagged Donald Trump, United States president, current president, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Amazon itself, FedEx, UPS, Quest Diagnostics, LabCorp, and also this company called Kydell that seems super hot. We tagged those folks on LinkedIn because I've got 10,000 folks connections on LinkedIn. I thought maybe some folks might connect the dots for us. I hope they're watching or watch later. And there's a reason we tagged all those folks and companies is they're coming up in what we're talking about today. So sorry, Rodger, I interrupted. Keep going.
No problem at all. If you want, for those who might not have listened in last week, if you want to, we can pull up those charts I sent just to close the loop on D614G, that being the
you want mutation. those new charts that you sent me?
Sure. I think that'll actually, I did that since we chatted last week, and I think it would really reinforce everything we spoke about last week. So we could spend a minute or two on those, then jump into antigen testing.
Cool. Let's show that here. Give me a second.
While you're pulling that up, I'll just talk to what the implications of that were. So we chatted last week on D614G, the mutation that now seems to predominate throughout the world as it relates to COVID-19, and ultimately the implications. Correct, yeah. So if you just want to open up that first page there. If it shows both, if it shows both, that's fine. Top one is very simply, they're both is all right. So the first one, the only difference between these two is that the top one was as of June 24th, And the bottom one is now 6 days later as of yesterday, June 30th. And the reason I'll share that, why I showed both in just a moment. But the top one there, you'll see back in early April and mid-April, the blue line being cases peaked first. Then you had hospitalizations peak right behind it, the purple line. Then you had deaths, the red line, peak right behind it. They moved in relative lockstep for about a month or so there. And then in May, you started to see this remarkable divergence between the three. You can see cases once again creeping back up, and when you go down below, you'll see they've already gone up. But basically, what I saw was that even as cases were on the verge of setting a new high, hospitalizations were down roughly half, and deaths were down roughly 75%. And we went into a number of the reasons that may be the case. I encourage you to watch last week's if you want to hear more on that. When you scroll down to the bottom, this one is now 6 days later, and you see how much they look like. The chart looks different because of how high cases are once again, but same conclusion is certainly still in place. In fact, you can see, back in April, cases and hospitalizations set their peak, and they're still 40% off on hospitalizations, 75% off on deaths, even as cases have set new all-time highs in a big way. And you can see that with that ramp to the far right. So
and
again,
last week, just to sum up also, and of course you've said all along that the death rate is the most important thing you look at. Obviously you can't just look at one piece of data, but that's the most important thing you look at. So you're saying there's some, relatively good news here, but also that you were basically saying this new strain that we talked about last week, which is the hardest name in the world to remember, D614G. Some marketing folks got to do a better job of naming these things, is that that was a mutation that was more infectious, bad news, but less deadly, good news.
Correct. And I don't think that the decrease in deaths is solely attributed to that, but I think it could play a role in it. And I think the science may ultimately determine, may help bear that out. But again, the whole idea was, to the headline here, people can live with getting sick, they can't live with dying. And so unfortunately, getting COVID doesn't seem to be all that, a lot of people don't fear that. It's going to the hospital, it's certainly dying that are the biggest fears. So as cases have really ramped recently, I just want to keep in focus how well we're performing on hospitalizations and deaths. The caveat there on hospitalizations, you see hospitalizations now starting to creep up. I'll also call out the state of Florida for the fact that they do not publish their daily hospitalizations. And seeing as that is one of the largest states, most populous states in America, and that it has 4.5 million people age 65 plus, I think that's a disservice to the public and to the people that live in Florida, that they don't have that information handy on a daily basis to make decisions for themselves and their families. So if you added Florida in there, that number would probably look a little worse. Unfortunately, they're a non-reporter.
Good for you for calling them out, by the way. Pretty big state, last I checked.
Yep.
So let's so today, antigen testing, that's what we're talking about. You called it the most important tool to tackle COVID that people don't know about. Is that accurate? Maybe you had a better quote than that.
Yeah, certainly that not a lot of people know about, and certainly that's not getting
the biggest
used
tool
as
we're
much
not
as-
COVID tool we're not using was what you
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Short of a vaccine, I think it's one of the biggest tools at our disposal if we can get it ramping quickly and ramping right.
And again, remember, I'm going to play Mickey the Dunce here. I'm a, entrepreneur who knows almost nothing, especially compared to you, about COVID. I just got off a John Deere tractor. I literally ran into a tree 7 minutes before this call. It was a dead tree, fortunately, so it had some give. And then I physically took down the dead tree, partly because I was stuck in the John Deere. That shows you how much prep I was able to do for this. But I like playing Mickey the Dunce here about this, because I think most people don't, have not invested the time that you have, Rodger. But talk about antigen testing. First, just give, what is antigen testing? Give the general definition, description.
Sure. And you can access the screen share if you wish as we jump into that.
Yep.
I'll actually take it back one step to the test that more people know. They don't know it by this name often, but It's the PCR test. That is the conventional, traditional, when most people say a COVID test, that's what they're talking about. Polymerase chain reaction. Basically that in a simple terms, that is a test that looks for the genetic material of the virus. So it is the most accurate. It is certainly the most prone to bottlenecks, as we've seen recently. It's got about half a dozen different steps involved along the way, and you're only as quick as the slowest one. Just recently, actually, with cases and testing really ramping once again, LabCorp and Quest have suggested that they're only going to be able to get test results back within a day to folks that are hospitalized or anticipating a surgery. Other folks will have to wait 3 to 5 days. So you can understand the constraints of that traditional, albeit most accurate style of test. And that's why I started looking to other things that could help us in our fight. So that's PCR test. That's the kind of gold standard. Antibody
PCR test is what it's called?
PCR, polymerase chain reaction, correct.
Yep.
That's the most accurate, goes through a lab. It's got those, swabs. I actually did one recently last week, the NT swab up your nose. You need the virus reagents, the mediums, you need facilities, staffing. In some sense, you need marketing because people have to know the testing facility exists, which is still harder than it should be. So yes, and we're doing about 500,000 tests of those per day in the US, which is up 2 to 3-fold from 1 to 2 months prior. But for reference, it's been suggested we need to be doing between 1 million at worst, 3 to 4 million better, 10 million at best tests a day to really combat this and really know that we're kind of curbing the spread. And again, we're doing 500,000 now. So
and by the way, I know we're doing this on the fly. I like this tool. Something I do know a little bit about is what Google tools and what people are searching on. Are any of these searches on Google that I'm showing on my screen right now relevant? I know some of these are for HIV, but the
PCR test. When people look at a PCR test, I'm venturing that 99 out of 100 of those are imagining it in the context of COVID.
Okay, and 87,000 people last month is what this tool is saying. Searched PCR, 9,000 search PCR test, and so forth. I know it's not completely COVID, but these days, as Rodger's saying, it's mostly COVID for sure.
Most people just say COVID test, but that is the technology that underlies the predominant test in America right now.
And what was that volume of tests that per day you think we need to get up to?
We're currently at about 500,000 a day. We need to be at, 1 would be a worst case, in my opinion. 3 to 4 would be much better, and 10 would be amazing. I'm not suggesting that all those tests need to be PCR tests. In fact, it's almost unimaginable that they would be. That's why I've started looking to antigen tests as that test that could help get us over the hump in a big way.
And in a perfect world for you, would the antigen tests be that 5 million, 10 million a day number?
It could easily be half, if not more of those, 2/3.
What's the difference between an antigen test and a PCR test?
Yeah, PCR test very simply looks for the genetic material of the virus. The antigen tests look for the proteins that are a signature of the virus. So they're looking for modestly different things, but ultimately why antigen tests are so helpful then is because if you think of like the rapid strep testing or the pregnancy test you can take at home, antigen tests can ultimately be as simple, quick, and generally reliable as that. It will never be as reliable as a PCR, a traditional test, because those are just the way those are ultimately processed is inherently more accurate. But before I continue on antigen tests, I'll jump to the middle one that a lot of people have talked about, that being antibody tests. Okay. So antibody tests it's blood work, which is to say more work. It's again, not simple enough. It's blood work that's done to test if you have the antibodies of COVID-19 in your system, which would be generally expected had you had the virus prior and fought it off. Now it's unknown what benefit that may provide to not getting it again, if at all. It's thought that maybe if you had it prior to D614G, maybe you could still get the D614G variant. So my opinion for antibodies, for the most value they can provide, is in doing them for a large enough segment of individual populations, say New York City, on a monthly basis to assess the spread of the virus through the population. Clearly, our testing is not catching all of the positives. And so if 1 month you find New York City has X amount of people test positive for antibodies, and the next month it's 2X, then 3X, you can get a sense of how many people truly have had the virus, even if testing hasn't shown that to be true. So again, PCR tests are kind of the gold standard that really everyone is talking about when they often say test. Antibody tests test for a prior infection that you had in the past. And antigen tests test for a current infection. They simply they simply test it in a different way that is modestly less accurate, but still accurate enough for a lot of individuals and a lot of needs.
By the way, just a quick search here to show what people are searching related to this on Google. This is for last month. 1,100 people searched this positive RT-PCR test. Covered from COVID-19 test kit, which states have COVID-19 test kits. Just thought you might be interested in seeing some of that. Cool. So when we talk about that big volume, can you talk about the companies who's stepping up right now that are impressing you with the antigen testing?
Yeah, so shout out to San Diego. I spent some of my childhood there. So there's a company out of San Diego called Quidel. They, on March 9th, so almost 2 months ago now, kind of jarring when you think 2 months and I don't know how much has really happened, but they had the first FDA approved antigen test. They anticipated by end of June, which was now just passed, that they could be making 1 million of these a week. I called and they're currently only available to be prioritized for first responders and folks in the healthcare community, which I very much understand. They anticipate ramping to about 1.5 million tests or so of production capacity by end of year, which is to say about 84 million a year, they're saying, by end of year again. Ultimately, I would love to see 1 billion of these produced in much shorter order. And I feel I don't know enough about the technologies. Again, it exists for other things we can test. So I don't have concerns that we can more rapidly develop this technology and manufacture the test. And we're only limited by our will. So why are we not throwing more resources behind a company like Quidel to get that, to do 1 billion of these this year, right? I mean, I saw they received a grant from BARDA and Health and Human Services for under $1 million. I mean, we're throwing trillions of dollars at myriad of other things. Why we're not throwing billions of dollars to really ramping antigen testing in a big way quickly? I came up with this thought of like four to a door. I'd love to see somebody step up to the plate, put the money and resources behind ultimately making 1 billion of these as quickly as possible, 500 million of which I would distribute to every household in America. There are 130 million households in America. Imagine USPS delivering 4 to every household, shortly, such that if anyone in your home is experiencing symptoms, you can take this rapid test. It's a 15-minute to 30-minute result test. It can be done with a saliva sample in the comfort of your own home. When they give you a positive, they are 99% generally reliable. So if it tells you you're positive, you probably are. If it does have a propensity to kick off false negatives, such that if you're experiencing bad enough symptoms and get a negative result, I would still encourage seeing a doctor or hospital to get a PCR test. But for a lot of folks, this won't replace alternative, more commercial style tests, but will rather provide an additional much needed mass market testing option that can quickly and reliably provide results either at home or at work. And that's what I feel like we're really missing in this fight, because the choice between our lives and our livelihoods, that being like whether we live or those around us live, or if we can go out of our homes comfortably, is a false choice. And I'm firmly of the opinion that our country's greatest prospect for long-term damage won't be medically induced. I have all the confidence in the world in the medical community to come up with the therapeutics and vaccines over the next 6, 12, 18 months to ultimately work us out of this. Bless their heart for doing so. but rather America's serious long-term damage is going to come from a crisis of confidence. It's going to come from structural unemployment that's born out of this taking longer it's us taking longer to get back to our lives, and ultimately the recovery then taking longer to take hold, the green shoots, if you may.
Gotcha. Let's pause for a second. I forgot to also, or I wanted to remind anyone who's watching, listening, looking at it later on, that, and also give a shout out to a couple folks that leave a comment if you've got any 5 comments. Is that right? There we go. This is from last week's one. And again, Rodger and I are not doing anything here to make money. We have no real ask except to spread the word on some of these ideas. But thank you to Ray K and Young Kim for giving comments on last week's interview, just asking questions, and Rodger replied. Rick James talked about a fake news. I hope, Rick, that you don't come back and comment on this, or if you do, hopefully it's more useful to you than the last time. But if you got any comments, leave them here so we can see it. And also, Rodger, you've got an email, right, to give out? You want to give it out right now real quick?
Yeah, for folks that may have any questions or want to see about receiving the distribution of information I provide each week, you can email me at covidromo@gmail.com. So that's COVID Romo, ROMO @gmail.com.
Cool. And we'll remind folks at the end. And again, you can just ping them, and there's all free sharing, but connecting the dots is what I'm trying to help do. And real quick, you mentioned, by the way, Quidel or Quidel, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but I do notice that they are, have kind of gone through the roof as a stock, and they're worth, what'd you find? Where's the market value?
Almost 10 billion.
9.3, yep. So $9.3 billion company. In my little Google tool here, tons of people are searching Quidel. It's interesting, Quidel stock. More people are searching it about, it looks like, the stock than about necessarily some COVID help directly, which is always interesting. Wall Street's often a lead indicator of the rest of what's going on. I'll stop sharing my screen so folks can see you instead, Rodger. But we brought up Jeff Bezos, Donald Trump. So the first thing, U.S. Postal Service. Obviously, we need Trump and Congress to help nail that. Is that kind of your first challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I first thought of Amazon just naturally, but again, we've got the U.S. Postal Service, and
why do you think somehow Jeff Bezos and Amazon might move slightly faster than the United States government? Is that what you're saying?
Imagine that, right?
They'll probably get it done through the U.S. Postal Service before.
I'm not picky where leadership comes from. I'd like to think it comes at a national level first and foremost, but if not, I encourage local leaders and business leaders to step up to the plate and do what our national leadership unfortunately may not be. Yeah.
And one, Rodger and I kind of agreed we're not going to make this a political sort of show or event or interview or anything else. But the facts are Amazon seems to move pretty fast, and lately the U.S. government seems to move pretty slow.
If Quidel can manufacture 100 million of these, find them the resources to ultimately multiply that number tenfold. Because if we can manufacture enough of these quickly enough, I really feel like it can be a tool for people to have at home, at work. Again, imagine 500 million of these tests going to every household in America, such that if anyone ever experiences symptoms, you can take one and have results quickly. The idea that people are taking PCR tests now and waiting 3 to 5 days to get results, imagine the number of people they may come in contact with between those. I took a PCR test myself last week, just had a little chest pain and coughing, and just better safe than sorry. Imagine the other 500 million being made available to American businesses with the most at-risk employees. So you can think a lot of the manufacturing, the food processing plants, places where we can get people back to work. And in some sense, we need to get people back to work, but we need to do it safely. And so the idea of a test that you can spit into within 15 to 20 minutes, have a pretty reliable result if true. If you're having bad enough symptoms, I'd argue you probably shouldn't even be at work. But if you are and experience a negative test result, go get a PCR. But this is it's a hugely underutilized test. When I took my PCR, I actually asked them, I said, any thought that you guys have antigen tests anytime soon? They suggested it probably won't be until September. So it's, that's 2 months away. We don't have that amount of time in this fight. I mean, my priority and the priority of politicians and anyone in public service in this role should be the safety and health of every American life, whether it be at home, at work, or while out and about. And to the extent you've already seen renewed shutdowns again in some areas out of the huge case spikes we're seeing. If we really want to make America go out again, I'll use that kind of MAGA term there, you can't do it without, reinstilling some sense of confidence. And I think antigen tests can be a huge quiver in the cap for that confidence.
And I loved early on that you said, hey, I don't care if, because you've got some real good ideas here. I don't care if Trump and his team steal this idea and run with it. I don't need any credit, meaning Rodger doesn't need any credit. Certainly I don't either. I love that. And by the way, we should also say, hey, UPS, can get this thing distributed. FedEx can, some other upstart delivery service, perhaps. Maybe Uber can get involved, right? And Lyft. So,
anybody.
Anyway, let's wrap up and talk about what we're going to talk about next week. Any final thoughts? Well, first off, what do you think we should cover next week? That's a segue out of this week's, which is really focused on antigen testing and this idea of distributing, more like 10 million a day, you said, right? 10 million a day until we knock it.
That's where some folks believe we need to be to really confidently instill confidence and make sure we've curbed spread. I'd be happy with 1 or 3 to 4. We're at 500,000 right now. So if we can double / 6 to 8x, I'll take that. I mean, it's the road of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
Cool. What should we talk about next week? Just briefly, what do you think is a good segue out of this? And then let's wrap things up.
My whole approach throughout the whole last, let's say, 3.5 months or so has just been to talk to the things that I think aren't getting enough attention and focus. Hopefully somebody with influence can pick it up, run with it, do something with it, and maybe we can't. Last week, we talked about D614G. That was something I don't think was being talked about much, although it's growingly in the news. And I think antigen tests are today. I honestly, I'd have to think more. I don't want to just be here and talk for the sake of talking. I want to think about something that's important, that's not getting attention, that we can provide an audience for. So I'd probably just let's maybe wait and see how things play out, what comes together, and see what deserves talking to.
Cool. And basically, just to sum up, I mean, really a lot of this, the theme was an open letter to Trump, Bezos, UPS, FedEx, Quidel, LabCorp, Quest Diagnostics, you name it, to get together and help, as Rodger said, make America go out again. And again, we're not making this political, but it sure would be good to have the confidence that Rodger's talking about for folks to feel healthy and get back to normal. We all want that. Cool. And Rodger, just remind everyone your email and then let's wrap it up.
Sure. If you want to have any further questions, or if you want to receive the periodic distribution, just please message me at covidromo@gmail.com. That's covidromo@gmail.com. Typically send that out each kind of Friday, Saturday. Again, I want to make sure I'm sending out stuff that's actionable and insightful. So it may vary timing wise sometimes.
Cool. And we had 388 people watch this last week with almost zero promotion. I think afterwards, Rodger, emailed his mom and a couple friends, but that's an awesome start. And hopefully we spread the word more. Leave a comment down below if you've got anything you want to add, so that those few hundred people can, and maybe hopefully a lot more, can see what you've got to add. So either email Rodger or leave a comment below, do both. And thanks, Rodger. We'll be chatting soon, and appreciate you sharing all this.
Certainly. Appreciate it. Thanks again, Rob. Stay safe. Have a good holiday.
You too.